Hello. Okay, it's working. Hello everybody, my name is Roha Shazad, and I would like to start off acknowledging that we are on Treaty 6 territory, homeland of the Métis. Looking out, I am very happy to see you guys here today, so thank you for taking your time out of your day to attend this panel. Today, we gather to discuss the importance of men's mental health. From a young age, masculine norms are continuously conveyed to boys through peers, family, and especially social media. In many societies and cultures, men and boys are taught from an early age that showing emotions is a sign of weakness. Statements such as, "Real men don't cry," "Stop acting like a girl," or "Suck it up," teach boys they should not express their emotions, and it reinforces the idea that they should be strong and stoic. At times, these norms discourage men and boys from being in tune with their emotions. When you pick up a magazine or you go to a movie, what do you see? From magazines to television, men and boys are portrayed in emotionless, warlike experiences. In action movies, as protagonists who ultimately save the day. Such statements can shape the way boys not only think of themselves, but each other. And as they advance into adulthood, society further reinforces gender stereotypes and norms through media, education, and other areas of culture. The definition of gender stereotype is a generalized view or preconception about attributes or characteristics that ought to be possessed by, or the roles that are or should be performed by women and men. Gender stereotypes are harmful when it limits men's and women's capacity to develop their personal abilities, pursue their professional careers, and make choices about their lives and life plans. These stereotypes can be hostile and negative, or even benign, but they can restrain individuals both personally and professionally. While these images consciously and subconsciously teach boys to be tough, sometimes the issue of the heart is not addressed because they are told not to show emotions. It is critical that men and boys have outlets not only learn about their gender equality and positive gender representation, but to be able to address their hurt and pain and be transparent about their feelings. It is now more than ever we challenge today's society's definition of masculinity and realize that manhood and boyhood is not all about being macho and in control. It is about showing love, equity, and respect for everyone. And acting in this way is not a sign of weakness, but a signal of true strength. The traditional ideas of masculinity has become a silent crisis in society today. We must challenge the status quo of masculinity so that we can break the cycle of gender stereotypes and have a more equitable and a less gender-biased society. Today, we gather to do exactly that. I will now hand over the floor to the panelists as they will share their personal mental health journeys with you. I will pose 5 questions and all the panelists will get a chance to respond. Questions will be at the end, so please hold on to them or just write them down so you don't forget. So without further ado, let me introduce you to this year's panelists. First off, on my left side here, we have Andre Baer. And Andre is from from Territory 6. He graduated with his Bachelor of Education degree and is now pursuing his Doctor of Law with the University of Saskatchewan. He is a former youth representative of the FSIN and co-chair of the AFN National Youth Council. In 2016, Andre was appointed as an advisor to the Minister of Crown Indigenous Relations Canada for the implementation of TRC Call to Action at Action 66. At 6 years old, Andre most recently served on the Indigenous Bar Association Board of Directors and now serves on the Canadian juries. Next we have Stephen Mull. Stephen is a third-year kinesiology student here at the U of S. Stephen grew up in a small town in Saskatchewan and was fairly involved in sports. Before coming to university, he did not view mental health as a priority. After a challenging first year and the isolation of COVID, he began to really search for help, which came in the form of professionals and friends. He also has absolutely no idea what he's doing after he's finished university, even though he's done next year. That's okay, Stephen. We're all in the same boat. Next we have Tyler D. Tyler is a fourth-year pharmacy student here at the U of S. He grew up playing hockey that brought him here to Saskatoon, where he played for the Saskatoon Blades. As a hockey player, he knew what was expected from him as a guy playing a tough man's sport, and now he pursues his career in pharmacy. He has been able to learn and broaden his knowledge about mental health. Next, we have Kirk Ford. Let me find you here. Kirk Ford is a multidisciplinary dancer, teacher, award-winning choreographer, and third-year computer science student here at the U of S. He has trained in multitude of styles of dance, including tap, jazz, ballet, contemporary, and hip-hop since he was 4, which has taken him all around the world to learn, train, teach, and compete. Kirk's upbringing within the competitive dance scene has forced him to create, break, and reform his own perceived sense of image and masculinity many times throughout his life, a process which has helped solidify and expand upon his artistry. Then we have Evan King. Evan is a counselor at the Student Wellness Center who has worked in clinical practice for 11 years. He is grateful that his education and professional journey has challenged gender norms and has provided a space to explore emotional vulnerability, gender norms, and how they impact himself. Recently in his practice, he has been happy to explore toxic masculinity with clients and now it impacts men's mental health, such as how they seek out help or don't. He has an interest in challenging mental health stigma in men and all populations. And lastly, we have Ryan Delansky. Ryan works here at the U of S in 2 roles: the counselor of residence, mental health support for student living in U of S residents. His role is clinical outreach coordinator and now the lead point person for Husky athletes looking to access supports. Ryan has worked with young individuals for over a decade and strives to help others challenge stereotypes and become area of their own implicit biases. So I will now just pose the first question. And that is, what does masculinity mean to you and why? And we will start off on the left side and continue down.
Hello. Hello. My name is Andre Bear. I'm from both the Little Pine and Canoe Lake First Nations. I'm in my last year of law school here at the U of S. And I do a lot of work in politics, government. I'm a political advisor and policy analyst with different tribal councils in Canada. Thank you for having me. I haven't talked to anybody on the campus in this kind of capacity. I usually do presentations for First Nations across the country, and this is the first time that I got to do a presentation at my own school. So thanks for having me. And so masculinity to me, there's 2 different things. There's one in the kind of Canadian context as to how Canadians might see masculinity today. And I think that there's an important discussion that needs to be had in terms of how masculinity has been politicized. And what I mean by that is when I look at my own people and how we see masculinity, we don't see it as something that is meant to be negative or to harm other people in any way. And I'll give you an example of that. How we say the creator is Mamo Tawi Mao Semanto. It means the father of everything, the father of all of creation, of all things that are alive. And when I brought that up in one of my classes once, some people were offended that we genderize God in that way, that God is a he in our language. And so from a political perspective, it could make people really uncomfortable. But from a cultural perspective, it's part of our language and who we are to see masculinity as something that what it means is our fathers or our sons. It's that relationship between that we have for our fathers, because everybody has a father. Not everybody has sons, but that's the specific relationship objectively that we're talking about through my culture, through who we are. But in the Canadian context, it gets really political and messy, and I'm happy to see where this conversation goes throughout the day.
Okay, so Webster's dictionary defines masculine. Okay, so to answer this question, I'm going to tell you a little bit about my life. I was raised without a father, and I grew up poor as a Chinese person in a small town, which really influenced my view of mental health and masculinity. Growing up without a father meant that I didn't have a real male role model in my home, so that means I relied on media to understand what it means to be a man. And that to me meant being a hero who fixes everything and everyone other than himself. And growing up in a small town, you're around a lot of like older farmers, coffee row at your local restaurant. The men gather around, they speak for hours, but they never really share their pain or what they're feeling. So I thought being a man was this silent understanding that everyone has problems, but no one wants to talk about them, and if you do, you'll be different. No one wants to be different, especially in my case when I already felt like that, because I had undiagnosed ADHD, Chinese, surrounded by white men who would rather speak about the weather than what was really going on in their heads. And because we were raised by movies and TV to believe that wearing emotions makes you a woman, or if you speak, someone will make homophobic remarks about you, as if that somehow makes you less than. And less than what? A man, a stoic problem solver who can't fix himself. Someone who suffers in silence so they're not labeled as different. Someone who feels a spectrum of emotions but only expresses a few. A broken reflection of what it means to be human.
Hi everyone, my name is Tyler. Again, thank you for having us out today. For me, masculinity, I guess, has kind of changed over the course of my life. Hockey has been a huge part of my life and continues to be to this day. And looking back on it now with the perspectives I have, it really from an early age, and it's just kind of how hockey is, and as many of you have probably seen over the last year or so, hockey culture is starting to change a lot, but it still kind of reinforces this idea of you have to go out and be a tough person to play. You have to battle through injuries. If you come back to the bench and you've had a bad shift, you're going to get yelled at by your coach, and you kind of just learn to, I guess, compartmentalize these things and think to yourself, okay, I may be hurt, but I'm going to play through an injury. And with injuries especially too, it's easy if you break your leg or throw out your shoulder or something. They're physical things that most people, for the most part, go, okay, yeah, no, that guy can't play. He broke his leg. He can't skate with a broken leg. But really, hockey's really behind on the whole mental aspect of things. We've seen recently the Chicago Blackhawks have a huge scandal that really is just horrific to imagine that that could happen to somebody. And it shows that, for me at least, it was taught you have to kind of battle through these things, and nobody really stood up for one another or talked about these things. If you did, kind of what happened with that whole scenario happens, where you get pushed to the wayside, you kind of are the outcast, and we're learning, I guess, more and more that, obviously that's not how things need to be. And then for me, I mean, coming into pharmacy has been good. I'm not going to pretend that we're mental health experts or anything, but we've definitely been, we've been taught and had different classes, and I've had the opportunity to listen to many people and kind of broaden my understanding of it. And the biggest thing that I guess that has taught me is that, just seeing different people that come in every day looking for help, whether it's through, therapists or medications or this or that. It's, as much of a macho man that you might think it might be, up to, any other description of a man that you can think of. And it just goes to show that, I guess everybody's dealing with things. And it's made me, I guess, understand that, being a man and being masculine today, to me, is what a lot of those people are doing, and that's going forward and finding the help that they need, and being able to look after themselves. Like you had mentioned, that's something that we as men aren't really told to do. You look after your family and your loved ones and everybody else first, and then you push yourself to the wayside. But I think it needs to become a thing where you put yourself first.
Hi. My name is Kirk. Thank you once again, Roja, for having me out here. For me, in a less personal sense, masculinity informed a large portion of movement throughout my life. I come from a dancing background. Many styles of dance have masculine type moves and feminine type moves. And from a very, very young age, I kind of realized that there's all these different variants and bases, and it kind of helped me develop my definition of masculinity in a way that, although this is a set of attributes, behaviors, and movements that are associated with men, you don't have to be a male to inherently draw upon the good characteristics of masculinity, the courage, the leadership, the whatever, that the societal norms. And conversely, the same with femininity and aspects of that as well, the good aspects of that. I'm sure for anyone who comes from a dance background in there, in the audience here, or anyone who's been to a dance recital even, has seen a musical theater number or a ballet number where girls are dressed up as guys. You know what I mean? It's quite common. Happens a lot because as a dude in dance, I was basically outnumbered. The male to female ratio was 1 to 25. So yeah, I've been raised by some very, very strong women, and they're huge impact on my personal life, and at a very early age kind of shattered that gender binary for me of masculinity and femininity. And although I do strive to be strong, independent, courageous, and a good leader, kind of these societal norms for masculinity, I tend to disassociate who I am personally with any notion of masculinity or femininity, simply because the idea that masculinity is secured by denying any semblance of softness and emotion or any feminine traits is just, it's not right. It's not good to suppress those feelings and do things like that. We're all human. We will all go through these emotions at some point in our life. It's inevitable. It's not worth tormenting yourself by keeping all that deep down inside. We all go through it, and we live in a time where we're starting to kind of get through on a more societal level that this is okay. And I think in that sense, the societal definition of masculinity is progressing in a very healthy way. It's getting there, and that's kind of where my definition lies too. I want it to be inclusive. I want guys to feel like they can express their emotions without any sort of reservation.
Hello? Oh, it is still on? Oh, hi. Yeah, so I'm Evan. I'm a counselor here actually at the Student Wellness Center at Place Real. This question was greatly timing by the host. It's the first question, so I thought it was a good opportunity to maybe share like my narrative of masculinity and also introduce myself a little bit more as well in the context of my profession, since that's why I'm here, and also being a male. But going from high school, I was always quite a quiet young man, very reserved, very shy, a lot of social anxiety, restlessness, panic attacks, and just was never really felt safe or encouraged to talk about it, and myself quite anxious and shy about it myself, being an anxious and shy individual. So when I looked at this question from the email, I took a reflection of what it is to me now and what I like to encourage and support and what it has been. So what it was to me before and what I learned was to be strong for other people, to support other people, to make sure that I can do what I can as a family member, as a brother, as a child, a son, etc. and not really taking care of myself. And then I also found it really interesting some of the experiences that I had after thinking about this question as well, and how some of my maybe anxious and restless behavior may have looked. And I do remember I was at this gathering. I do want to give credit to my peers. They were very open and welcoming to quite a shy individual, but then you have to ask what their narrative is, right? So I started to get more involved. I started to play some football and things, but it still struggled with a lot of social anxiety and things, and had difficulties connecting with people, but quite welcoming environment. Anyway, so I was at my first gathering there and feeling really welcome and things, but quite shy. I didn't say a word. And I do remember someone did acknowledge, Evan has not said a thing today. And I do remember my friend's partner saying at the time, well, Evan's just kind of a big, strong man. He doesn't really talk. He's there and he likes to be present and he takes care of things. I just found that an interesting memory that came to mind when I did think about this question of the panel and how it often is misrepresented, for no one's fault of our own, but maybe the society's narrative, right? Another, we'll close up soon here, but another interesting, one of the reasons I did choose to become a therapist is because I did want to seek out counseling during this time, but I didn't find the resources available. So my parents were very supportive, very good, that they wanted me to go to university, but gave me the option of what to do. And that's why I chose to go into the field I am, which my background is social work. But again, so now I'm 17 and I signed up for this orientation. I have a great sister. She set me up with residence. She told me what to expect. Really good. I'm going to thank her actually tonight. But anyway, so I go to this orientation, BSW orientation. I was 17 male. I go in there. It was probably over 100, but probably about 100 people. I was the only male. And I was 17, and I was a little worried being there in the first place. So I got through that day and ended up keeping with it. But I knew even in my first year that I was happy that I did challenge that and stay in a group or maybe a population I obviously felt quite different in. So that's my answer.
Awesome. Thanks, Evan. So yeah, I'm Ryan Belansky. I work here at the U of S as well. It's was mentioned, 2 positions, counselor in residence, and then doing clinical outreach, so everything kind of around mental health. My background, obviously mental health as a therapist, we can understand that side of it. But when I think about masculinity, for myself, now having two sons, one's 6 and one's 11, I often think about what it's going to look through their eyes. So I hear, all these young men's stories and what Evan's saying as a colleague of mine, and I can see bits and pieces of my own story, and it brings up recollections. I'm sure all of us can kind of can agree with that, right? And similar. Grew up playing hockey. Quit playing hockey at 16 because of reasons around that
it was just, environments can be toxic, and that environment was toxic. I've seen some really, really good ones. But growing up with a single mom, I would say the majority of my masculinity was found in her leadership as the matriarch, if that makes sense. Right, having to challenge a lot of these things. Not to say that my dad wasn't around, but it was spotty and here to there, and now very close to him because there's other relationship dynamics. So when I think of masculinity or anything that has definition inside of that, I often question, what's that ecological approach? What does the ecosystem look like around that person? What do they take away? Now being a father, being a coach, as I said, now, quitting hockey at 16, exploring other things, not even thinking about it for 10 years. Now all of a sudden in my mid-30s and the to late 30s, I'm coaching my son again. I'm coaching all these young 11-year-olds who are kind of at the top of their game for who they are at their age. And I watch, the reason I decided to coach is what I saw was happening with parents and expectations, going with an 8-year-old to 2 provinces over and seeing what parents were doing and that kind of interaction, and trying not to do it without judgment, being that's the background I have, but then also remembering as a parent, my number one job is to be the safe place to land for my child, right? Where if they have a scary dream, they come to our room, can we sleep in your bed? I'm scared tonight, that's okay. But then eventually we get them to know that the room isn't scary, and how do they coach themselves to be able to stay in that room but still be able to reach out. And if I can do those in all areas, but not one area, an expectation, whether it be academics, sports, whatever it is, that kind of, whatever that piece is, then that's when they start to close up. And to me, when we start to close up, that's when those lenses and characteristics of toxic masculinity that we're seeing now can come out. Stealing from Evan's story, I remember going into into graduate school and being really excited, to share and ask questions and all this kind of stuff, and especially in the world that I work in. And and being excited to be in a community and a cohort, and I didn't get a lot of that reciprocated. I was really confused because I am outspoken, I like to talk, and you'll figure that out here. But I would ask these questions and I wouldn't get a response, or I'd get a passive aggressive piece of it. I had a mentor and she was fantastic, a professor, and she just pointed out one time, and not to be rude, she said, Ryan, look, you resemble the oppressor. You are the oppressor. You need to be aware of what privilege that comes with. And that was something I was aware of, again, those implicit biases, but what does that carry, and then what responsibility do I have as that? When I drop my boys off at school in the morning, have a good day, be a good leader. But letting them define what that means for them to be a leader, because I have my own characteristics, but they have to define that. Without saying you have to take charge and be the loudest, maybe it is, more by actions, more by compassion, and where that's led. So in terms of what does masculinity mean to me, I think it's a journey based on becoming aware and compassionate to yourself, but also being really aware of what your ecology is. What is my ecosystem around me, and how does my actions affect inside of that? I'm going to turn this off so it doesn't make a lot of sounds.
I would just like to thank all the panelists, and can we just give them a round of applause?